So hi there, everyone. My name is Alicia Cielle Heiser, and this is Lori.
Hello, I'm Lori Kaufman.
And it is 9:18 a.m. Pacific time in Corvallis, Oregon on June 15th, 2023.
And it
Um,
is 12:18 p.m. here in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Beautiful. And we just wanted to hop on here and record a little podcast about embodiment and astrology, guide a little breathing exercise for you, and talk about elements and temperament and ways that you can feel into your astrology more and feel how your astrology shows up in your body and in your lived experience. And so we'll start with some brief introductions. Like I said, my name is Alicia Cielle Heiser. I have an astrology practice, Alicia Cielle Astrology, where I offer natal chart readings and timing and client consultations with traditional astrological techniques for clients, really working on, guiding people to feel into their astrology and feel the embodiment of how their astrology shows up. I also use herbalism as a vehicle to facilitate that. I have an apothecary as well, where I handcraft personalized herbal teas for folks based off of their astrology, off of health concerns they might have. And I've also been writing a series of blog posts for the school I study at, Artemisia Academy, all about their Materia Medica blog posts, all about like little encyclopedias on different herbs to try to get more like researched medical and magical information out there about different herbs. And so that's a little bit about kind of me and what I work on too. Really just helping facilitate embodied understandings of the cyclical nature of life is kind of my baseline mission. And as I said, I live in Corvallis, Oregon, occupied Chipenifa and Kalapuya land. It's the land I grew up on. It's just gorgeous and green, and I feel really connected to the earth around me and feel so lucky to be able to live here. So yeah, Lori, what about you?
Hi, so I'm Lori Kaufman. I have been studying astrology in a more serious route for about 3 years, but I've been interested since I was a kid. So it's always been something where I've always gone back to astrology and tarot as a hobby or as an interest until in 2020 I did Deborah Silverman's online program and then started just reading a book every month and just really trying to figure out a way that I could start doing this full time and create more of a practice for myself. I focus more on trauma and Chiron and the asteroids, and I've loved to go down that route of really helping people using Chiron and Saturn to get out of patterning. I've also been teaching fitness for 12 years as of this year. I started dancing when I was about 3 years old, but then I started teaching Zumba while I was in college, and then that transitioned into circus work. I started teaching partner acrobatics. I have a certification in kids yoga, adult yoga, movement, body mindfulness, all of this kind of stuff that I've always loved to incorporate together. I'm Reiki 1 and 2 certified. I teach a little bit of basic astrology, and I have tarot school that I have created and am doing again in September and October. It's a 7-week course that really dips into a little bit of astrology and then just a lot of symbolism through each card of the tarot. It takes you fully on the fool's journey. I have a book out called Breadcrumbs from the Universe, YOU-Universe. And that has been a really fun project for me to really share how I've tied together astrology and embodiment, movement and partner acrobatics and all of that in my everyday life. And I also write some blog posts or share some things on my Patreon. And yeah, I mean, all over the place, trying to do a little bit of everything. I do a little palm reading as well, but Yeah, that my main focus has really been astrology recently and really talking about how to get inside your body and learn how to feel and understand the not only emotions of what's going on, but how to react to them and how to understand who you are on a deeper physical level.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Lori. And I think about how, Jason Hawley will talk about how he can be really hesitant to even like put a chart on the screen or like physically show someone a chart because it kind of objectifies the landscape that the chart is charting, is graphing, right? And that's been a really cool thing for me to think about learning from Jason Hawley of like, what, like when you look at a chart, what were the energies of the planets at the time that that person was born or that thing was, incepted or whatever happened? Like, where was the sun? And can you feel that, ninth house Gemini sun, or that, sixth house Pisces Saturn, or, those different planets, feeling them like below the horizon or up above, like radiating down onto you, and how those energies like come through you. And so I love all the ways that, you use fitness and acrobats and just different embodiment practices. And I'm working with herbs and plants and like tools from the earth to really just help people like, yeah, well, what does it feel like in your body to have these placements, and how does that show up in your life? And yeah, so with that, I always like to start my sessions with clients with like a little grounding exercise, a little embodiment exercise. And I know you have all of your cool breathing teaching certifications. And so do you want to guide a breathing exercise for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So for about 5 years, I worked for a nonprofit and I went into inner city schools and helped kids with mindfulness and breathing and yoga and general gym practices, basically. So I worked with a lot of kids on how to understand and move the body and proprioception and all of those terms that gym was cut for most of these kids in most of these schools. So it was really cool to be able to bring a program into them, so where they could actually understand and start to work with their bodies. And so one of the biggest things that we would do in that was really sitting with the belly breathing and understanding how to breathe correctly. And something that I find really important is that as we age, we stop breathing correctly because we are taught to suck in our bellies, to be smaller, to take up less space, to create this. And what that does to us physically is teach us that we need to be small. We need to take up as little space as possible. And that actually manifests into our breathing as well. It manifests into so much of our lives. And it's actually really crazy when you start thinking about the domino effect that feeling like you need to be smaller has on especially women in our society, but really everybody. And so I think it's really important to remind people that you're allowed to take up space, and taking up space is important. And especially when it comes to breathing, when we breathe correctly, we want to fill our entire lungs, our entire belly up. Like when you think about a baby who's breathing, you know how their bellies get really big and then really small and it contracts. But when you watch an adult breathe, their body doesn't move very much. And that's because we are basically contracting our abs to make ourselves look as small as possible. So for an exercise, if you want to stick your hands on your belly and just take maybe 2 to 3 big breaths in, and we're going to do this together, but you want to feel your whole belly just lift and expand up with you. And I always joke with the kids, if you want to picture a balloon being in your belly, you can do that. It can be whatever color you want it to be. It can be whatever it wants to look like. It can have a design on it, it can have an animal on it. You can make it fun, you can make it creative. It doesn't have to be serious adult time. So we're sticking our hands on our belly, and as we breathe in, we feel our belly get as big as possible. So take a deep breath with me. We're going to breathe in And then hold it for 3, 2, 1, and let it all the way out. We're going to do that again, but this time try to make it even a little bit bigger. Breathe in. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Let it out. And one last time, we're breathing in. Hold for 3, 2, 1. Let it out. This is something you can do on your own time if you want to do it with your eyes closed. But you just want to picture yourself taking up as much space as possible, because that's going to be very important to learn how to breathe with your full body before you can really do anything else. And when you start getting into practices like yoga or like meditation or any kind of movement or dance or anything really, learning how to breathe is the most important thing. And I see that a lot when I teach partner acrobatics, especially for adults. People will push themselves into a pose and then just hold their breath and try to force it. And I even have a friend who has a shirt that says, "Hold your breath and force it." And I laugh about that all the time, because that's what adults do. That's what people do so often, is just push themselves into this shape that they want to make because it looks beautiful, and they stop breathing. And the best thing you can actually do is take a step back, breathe, and relax into it. And I think that was the biggest thing that I loved about partner acrobatics, was that it taught me how to slow down and how to be patient. We'll talk about elements in a few minutes, but I don't have much earth in my chart, so that was something that, like, grounding wasn't very easy for me to understand at first. And so this was something that finally helped me find that grounding and find a little bit of an ability to listen to my own body and to slow down and to breathe and to understand that it's important that my whole body's working together, and it's not going to do that if I'm holding my breath and forcing something, because that's when injury happens. And the worst thing you can do is stop paying attention or stop being present. Stress is usually what causes illness and any kind of disease, any kind of accidents, because we're no longer in our body, we're no longer paying attention, we're no longer aligned. And that's what typically causes these things. So being embodied, standing just even in a mountain pose, anything that you can do to really firmly plant your feet into the ground is so good for any kind of practice and any kind of work that you do. It just will give you a lot more awareness into the self.
I love that. And I also just want to normalize that for a lot of us, like myself included, being in our bodies is really hard, and breathing is really hard. And, you know, trauma is something that can make it really scary and really difficult for people to be in their bodies, right? Like dissociation and going up into your head and disconnecting from your body is a really wise thing to do when you're in situations where you can't physically leave, but you don't feel safe. And, um, you know, it's taken me years to feel like I even have like little tiny plant roots growing through my throat, like coming down from my head into my body. And, you know, embodiment is like so simple and so complex and difficult at the same time. And, you know, I think that's where practice comes in, right? I've taken some classes with somatic practitioners trained in the lineage of generative somatics. And, you know, a really big component of that lineage is practice. Like, are you centering regularly? What are you practicing? You know, we're practicing something right now. We're always, you know, embodying something. And so those things like breath, those things like presence and awareness, even just like carving out 5 minutes here and there when you can to practice it and like give your body the chance to feel into it. But also like never push your body past what like it wants to do, right? If your vital life force, that's a big thing we talk about in my herbalism practices as well, is, working with the body's vital life force. And, you can gently shift behaviors and, guide your body to like healthier, more nourishing ways of being. But this isn't like January 1st, New Year's resolution, Capricorn to-do list, let's go.
Yes.
It's like what feels good in your body and what feels comfortable and accessible for your body. And like, I mean, discomfort also, like, I think it was Cameron Allen was talking about like safety and discomfort are two different things, right? So you can be uncomfortable and still like give yourself a felt sense of safety. And sometimes being uncomfortable is good and important for like, pushing yourself and expanding, but you don't want to put yourself in situations where you're feeling unsafe. And just be gentle and be slow with yourself with that.
Yeah, and to add to that, I just saw a show 2 nights ago actually that was talking about that, and she came in and she said it was an interactive show. She goes, "Does anybody feel uncomfortable right now?" And she was dressed in something very strange. So a couple people, she's like, "Come on, I'm sure somebody feels uncomfortable." And a few people were like, "I don't know what's going on. Yeah, maybe I feel a little uncomfortable." And then she's like, "It's interesting how everybody went to mentally uncomfortable because of how I'm dressed or how I'm acting or what's on the stage behind me. Not a single person felt the physical uncomfort in their own body." And then the whole rest of the show was about her imagining herself in different kind of skeletons or different kinds of bugs, or you know what I mean? Like imagining herself in different bodies because her body was experiencing so much chronic pain that she was just trying to disassociate from it. And I ended up having a very deep conversation with a couple of my friends afterwards, because I think I was lucky enough to grow up in a world where I was always moving and there's almost an addiction that comes along to it. But for me, that flow state is something I'm constantly seeking, and I feel that flow state from constant movement. And I realize that so many other people don't feel good because they can't get that, or it's not accessible to them, or they don't know how to start or where to start or how to move their body. And I think it needs to be more accessible to teach people that, hey, you can just go for a walk and that counts. You can just go outside in the woods, that counts. You can just sit in your body. You can just do a little bit of yoga. You don't have to be a professional to start and to do these things. And I think moving into an astrological sense, learning and understanding your body, even learning astrology, is so complicated at first, but once you start to dig into it, it really starts to unpack just how much there is to know. But once you start learning it, it becomes easier and easier and it starts to unfold. And so really that embodiment of the physical can't really come without the emotional, and vice versa. They need to be one package. It needs to be connected. And that's why I think embodiment astrology is so important to be talked about.
Absolutely. I love that. Do you want to dig into elements a little bit and kind of like, well, how can you use the theory of astrology to get to embodiment, right?
Absolutely. Great segue. So I think with elements, something that I've given many lectures on and talk about a lot, and even when I give anybody a reading, especially people who have never had any kind of reading or don't know anything about astrology, I always start on astro.com, that little element modality box, because I think for anybody who doesn't know anything about astrology, that's the easiest, simplest place where you can really get some serious knowledge about yourself without having to know anything or without having to have any deep understanding. And so I love to talk about how we truly tend to embody the element that we have the most of, and we truly tend to seek the element that we have the least of. But there always ends up being one or two elements that fall directly in the middle that we end up feeling very indifferent about. And for my own example, I have a lot of air. I have a middle amount of water, and then I have basically no earth and only one fire placement. But my fire placement is my Aries moon chart ruler because I'm a Cancer rising, and it's on my MC. It's in a mutual reception to my Mars. It's just, even though there's only one placement, I only needed one placement. It's very, very, very prominent in my chart. And so fire is something that is so important to me. It's probably the most important element to me. And air is so natural to me. I have a lot of Aquarius placements. I have a Jupiter in Libra. I have a lot of this ability to just talk constantly about these things that I care about. All of that's in my 8th house. I love depth. I love to have deeper conversations. And I love to really deep dive into all of these things. But for me, I've just found that water tends to be the one that I feel the most disconnected from. If I travel, I tend to not care so much about going to the ocean, or, I feel more drawn to earth, to mountains, to mountainscapes, or woods, or things like that, hikes. Water's beautiful, but it's just not something that I feel like I need. And so I love to go through that with people and explain that this element that you have a lot of is going to come very natural to you. This is going to be your talent, your strength. And this element that you have none of is going to be the thing that you probably seek out most in the world. And then there are people who are completely evened out and have an almost entirely balanced chart with all of them. And I feel like those people are super rare, but they're so interesting because they don't really have a lack or an abundance. They kind of fall somewhere in the middle. So those are the people that end up feeling the most disconnected from their body or their mind, that I've found personally, when I give them readings, because they're always like, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do something. I don't know what I'm drawn to. I don't know what I'm not drawn to. They always feel they give off this like ADHD type of energy, this very scattered, like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm doing. And those are always such interesting people to me, because it feels like it would be such a blessing to have such a balanced chart like that when it comes to the elements. But it also, I can very much see how it would manifest as a curse as well, or feeling like a curse at least, because it's like you don't know what your natural strengths or weaknesses are. So where do you focus? Where do you go? And it's almost like the mind just has a hard time making that association once you don't have a middle ground for it, or you don't have a very clear, this is your best, this is your worst. Like those tend to be the people that struggle the most.
Yeah. And it just makes me think about how, one of the things that is so useful with astrology is it gives us that map of, if we were all perfectly in tuned to our bodies and minds and ourselves, we wouldn't need astrology. We would just like know who we are and how we're embodied and what our experiences are. But like, I have a lot of planets in dark houses. It's been hard for me to access that without astrology. And so that's where, having the map of like looking at me like, oh, whoa, I actually have a lot going on in air, or I have a lot going on in fire. I also don't have a lot of earth in my chart. And so that's one reason why I surround myself in such green spaces and such like grounded earthy places, is, as a remediation to balance that out. But when you are very balanced, like that's information too, right? And so like that's where astrology can really help give people more language and more understanding to work with what is, and to like flow, like if you have a lot of fire available to you in your chart, then like when you need to be decisive, when you need to be active, when you need to be passionate and inspiring, like pull on that energy. But if you know that you struggle with being grounded and consistent and reliable, like earth signs, then maybe that's something to practice and cultivate. And that's where I think herbalism too can really come in, is like what herbs can balance these energies, what lifestyle practices, thinking earlier too to what you were saying about how like we don't need to be like licensed healthcare providers to take care of our bodies. And absolutely, like we are all responsible for taking care of our bodies, even though we don't have medical degrees, right? We're much more responsible for our bodies than our doctors are, actually, because we spend a lot more time with our bodies. And a lot of these practices really are quite simple, like not sitting all the time, just getting up and going for a walk every, few hours, even if it's just a short walk, ideally every hour, or like putting your bare feet in the earth, like literally, like we are electrical beings, and like putting your bare feet on some grass, on some dirt, on, just earth that's not asphalt, helps, absorb some of our electrical current and actually balance and ground us. And then, you can also breathe the way Lori was showing us, and feel your feet. And like, that sounds so simple, but if we all just did that more, like, how would things be different, right? And I think that the best practices are the simplest ones. And that's where the elements can be really exciting, is because like they're available to everyone. We can all like relate to water or fire or earth or air.
And there's so much you can do in the physical world to emulate that emotional spiritual realm. So I'll use water as an example. Water is your emotional body. So people who don't have any water might have a really hard time feeling their feelings, or expressing their feelings, or understanding their feelings even. And so like homework for that person could be to just go watch a sad movie and cry, but also go to the pool, go to take a shower, right? Go sit in your bathtub for a while, drink more water. You're probably dehydrated, right? Like, it's like there's so much you can do in the physical. And for me, not having earth, I'm constantly in the middle of the woods just trying to ground myself. I've bought 1 million plants recently just because I'm trying to surround myself with that earth energy, and I've never been able to keep plants alive. So let's try that, right? And like, if you lack fire, that is fitness, but instead of dipping straight into a fitness routine, maybe burn a candle first, like bring that fire, that manifestation, that intention into your life with something physical first, to show the universe that you're ready, or to show yourself in your subconscious that you're ready to really deep dive into these things. And then you'll be good. You'll be able to start bringing it in the scarier way, and the emotional way, and the physical way, right? Like, you can bring it into the body after you do something in the physical realm to show that you are ready to accept these energies almost. And that's my favorite thing to do, is give people homework based off of their lack and abundance in their chart, based off of the elements, before we even dip into the chart.
I love that. I'm developing kind of a similar practice in the teas that I make for people, because like obviously the herbs I incorporate will consider your temperament, which I'll explain in just a bit what that means. But they'll look at the elemental composition of your body, and balance that out, but then also including lifestyle things of, yeah, hey, and also like, we know this, right? Like, people who don't have a lot of water in their charts know that they have difficulty feeling their feelings, whereas I have a lot of water in my chart and I know that I'm very in my feelings, right? And so sometimes it's just giving more language to
It's
the key things
validating.
we're experiencing. Correct. Yeah, it's validating.
Yes. And I always joke too, especially if somebody is in their 30s that I'm giving a reading to, I always joke with them, none of this should be surprise to you, right? This should just all be validation. This should just all be something that you can put into a language, or put into a little bit extra understanding. This should not be something where you're like, oh my God, I have no earth. I've never, I would have never thought. It should be something that it's like, okay, here's a new way of seeing or reflecting on this. Putting a language to it is exactly the right word.
That's what astrology is. It's a language to understand the quality of a particular moment of time. Yeah, so talking a little bit about temperament is a bit more theory for like astro nerds and herb nerds, and people who just want to dig a little bit more into like, well, what is my elemental composition? And I study with Kelly Surtees, and she describes the temperament as like the soil of your soul. It's kind of like this baseline, like physiological, psychological makeup of like who you are, and it can modify everything else in your chart. So if you're an inherently, Aries sanguine person, then that is going to bring some heat to your, colder elements, and like make you a little more active than you might be otherwise, depending on your planetary placements. And so, temperament really describes like who we are subconsciously, who we are like at the end of the day. It's not something that ever changes, and it's your elemental buildup. And there's a lot of ways to calculate temperament. Lily has his long form as he does for many different things. And so you can go back to his Christian astrology book and get the long form for calculating temperament. And I think that's a little like more theoretical than I'm looking to do. And what, Kelly taught us is to work with Dorian Greenbaum's temperament and temperament factors calculation, because Dorian has done a lot of work kind of reclaiming this tradition into modern day usage. And really what temperament calculations highlight is how important our sun, our moon, and our ascendant are to like who we are as how we're made up. And we know that, right? Because we're always introducing ourselves as sun, moon, rising. And sometimes that can bother me because I'm always like, well, where's the ruler of, your rising sign, or where's the ruler of your sun? Because it just
Yeah.
changes so much. But still, the sun, moon, rising, and their rulers, like that's what you use to calculate temperament. And so what Dorian Greenbaum says you consider the temperament of your rising sign, you consider the temperament of your moon sign. So like what sign, is your moon in Pisces? Is it in Libra? Where is it? You consider the temperament of your sun by season. And so this is a little different and this is based off of Northern Hemisphere seasons. Kelly is from Australia, and she says it still works for people born in the Southern Hemisphere. But each season is associated with temperament. And I'll kind of give a list of all the associations at the end of this, but like springtime is a sanguine airy temperament, which means that it's hot and wet, right? You think about springtime as like facilitates growth, right? And so if you have a sun that is associated with Aries, with Taurus or Gemini, then it's going to be hot and wet. Whereas autumn time is more melancholic, it's more cold and dry. And so if you have a sun that's, in Libra, in Scorpio or Sagittarius, then it is going to be more cold and dry. So you're considering the sun by season, and then you're also looking at the ruler of your ascendant, the ruler of your moon by sign, and then also your moon phase, because all of the moon phases have temperamental associations as well. So this, is a lot more theoretical. I don't want to for the people who might be listening to this who are just more intro to astrology, you can absolutely reach out to us, and I would love to help you calculate your temperament. I'd also love to give you a reading and discuss your temperament with you. But this is just a bit more theory for the astro nerds who want it. So the things you use your ascendant sign, moon sign, sun by season, ascendant ruler, moon phase, and moon ruler by sign. And, this will just kind of repeat some of the things that Lori was talking about with elements, that it will really highlight, I have a lot of air and I have a lot of water in my chart, and both of those are wet signs. And so I'm a very wet, connective person. I want to bring things together. I want to feel connected to people. Whereas people who have a lot more earth and or fire that are dry might be a bit more boundaried or separative or independent in how they go about things, right? And then if you have a lot of colder energies, which are water and earth, then you might move a little bit slower. You might be a little more internalized. You think about, when water freezes, it stops, right? Things like when your body is subjected to cold temperatures, it directs your energy inwards towards your internal organs and not towards your extremities, right? So colder things make things more internal, whereas hotter energies, which are, fire and air, make things very external. They speed things up, they activate things, they bring more motion. And so this is just more language. In some ways, temperament is a buildup of those primary qualities: hot, wet, cold, and dry, which is then what elements are built off of, which is then what everything in the universe is built off of, right? And so that's why the temperament is the soil, is the foundation. And so I'll just end this little theoretical piece with kind of a list of the 4 different temperaments and their associations. And so you have fire is the choleric temperament. It is associated with hot and dryness. It's associated with Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. It's associated with the season of summer and the planets, the sun and Mars. It's also associated with the moon phase, of oh my goodness. Yes, it's associated with the moon phase of the first quarter and gibbous moon phases, which are like the really activating, heating up, like you're taking a lot of action when you're a waxing gibbous or a first quarter moon phase. So that could either be by progression or natally. And then also any of the people whose sun signs are during the summer, right? So that is Cancer, Leo, and Virgo also have hot and dry choleric sun signs in that way. And then you have the sanguine temperament, which is hot and moist. That is Aries. That's Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. It is spring. It is Jupiter, right? I already talked a bit about sanguine, but it's like the heat and moisture just allow things to grow. It's a very intellectual, heady energy. It is also associated with the new and waning crescent moon phases. And so you have the new life that's coming, like the seedling of the new moon or the first crescent is coming out of that. And then for the sun by season, you're looking at spring. So it's also associated with people whose suns are in Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And then you have the water, which is cold and moist. That's the phlegmatic temperament. And it's associated with the zodiac signs of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and winter time. And Venus is typically phlegmatic, although she can be warmer when she is oriental, when she's a morning star. But she's typically pretty cold and wet, like the phlegmatic sign. And then also the moon is pretty phlegmatic, but she's very changeable as well, depending on the phase and the sign and all the things I've been talking about. And phlegmatic energy is really like slow togetherness. Water like brings things together. It's very connective, but it's a little more internal than air. And then it is associated with the third quarter and balsamic moon phases. So if you have those moon phases, your moon might be a little wetter and a little colder than it might be, depending on other factors in the chart. And it's also associated with people whose suns are born during winter, which is Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And then the last one is Earth, which is melancholic. It is cold and dry. It's associated with the zodiac signs of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And Saturn has a very melancholic temperament, the very constricting, like bringing inwards, kind of separating structured energy of Saturn is very melancholic. It's also associated with the season of autumn. And so it's associated with people whose suns are during autumn in the Northern Hemisphere, which is Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. And then it is the melancholic temperament is also associated with the full and disseminating moons. And so you think of the full moon as like, I actually think that's quite interesting to think about it being melancholic and being cold and dry and what that means. But, it's kind of like Earth accumulates, right? And like the full moon and the disseminating moon are kind of the products of accumulation. So yeah, that's just some theory on how to work with temperament and how temperament is kind of used in astrology traditionally. But, I just want to bring that all back to say that like the theory is nothing without the embodied feelings of it, right? And so like having more language of like, oh, if I'm a very phlegmatic person, like how can I think about wintertime? How can I think about, the balsamic moon phase? How can I think about Venus and the moon? And like, what do they have to teach me about phlegmatic energy, about water, about myself? So that's really what temperament can help us do. I think associations in general are really useful for helping us form relationships and connections between things to get more of a like right brain understanding of like beyond the words and the headiness, like what are the images, what are the felt sensations? So yeah, there's a little bit about temperament.
Yeah, beautiful. I love how temperament and the elements are just such good ways to not that temperament is as simple as the elements, but they're just such good ways to understand who you are on such a simple level
Yeah.
without really going to deep dive.
Yeah, it's the fundamentals,
Yeah.
which is really the most important.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always good to go back to the basics and to understand how your body works and how your mind works and how you can use those things together.
Absolutely. Um, well, thank you so much for taking some time to chat, Lori. If people liked this and want to interact with your work more, where can they find you?
So I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm always posting some sort of fitness thing I'm working on, or classes or workshops or anything like that. And that's gonna be Lori K _127. My website is Lori period Kaufman 27 .com. And then outside of that, I have a Patreon and a book, like I mentioned earlier, Breadcrumbs from the Universe. And the Patreon is Breadcrumbs from the Loriverse, I believe. And that's been a new project I've been getting started. I do have tarot school planned. That's been my biggest project. It also is going to come along with a little workbook. You get a copy of the book, you get a deck to take home and keep, and you get a workbook that I've been creating that's going to follow along with the courses. And it'll have homework and journal prompts and everything else included in that. And that'll be September, oh my God, through October on Tuesday nights. It's going to be in person in Cincinnati, but I'm also offering it online. It'll be live streamed through the Patreon, I believe, or I'll send out a link to something. I still haven't quite figured out what I want to use for that, because what I used the last time wasn't my favorite. So if anyone is interested in signing up for that, or has more questions, or if you wanted a reading or just to chat or anything, feel free to reach out to me on any of those.
Awesome. Um, yeah, I'm also pretty active on Instagram, and I'll put our handles and websites in the show notes, but my Instagram is at Alicia Cielle. Um, and I do little mini astrology forecasts on there for different transits and what the energy is you can expect. I do information about herbs for different transits. I just did one on herbs for Venus and Leo. I offer astrology readings, natal chart readings that people can schedule with me. And I also make personalized teas for folks. And so I will do like a tea based off of your astrology and your temperament, with, organic loose leaf tea handcrafted for you. And I'll mail that to you. And then if you have any health conditions that you'd like support with, I am not a doctor. I am not a licensed medical care professional, but I would be happy, I'm a trained herbalist who would be happy to make, a tea blend that might be supportive of your conditions and give you some, lifestyle considerations that can be supportive of your condition as well. And so that tea comes with, both teas are 5 ounces of loose leaf tea. And then the health support add-on also comes with some consultation time. And both of them also come with a little write-up about your personal temperament, about your astrology, and then relevant herbal information as well. And so, yeah, and then I also have been writing all of my blog posts on different herbs as well. And so that information can all be found on my Instagram. And yeah, if you have any questions about herbalism, about astrology, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm just really excited that there's like more people working on practicing embodied astrology. And astrology can just get so heady and so intellectual. And so really the opportunity to, come back down into this realm, into the material realm, with all of the, our head is part of our body, of course. So like bring the headiness as well. But yeah, I'm just really excited about embodied astrology. So thank you, Lori, so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you too.
And thanks to everyone for listening.